Good morning. We are in the SunTrust Center in the Tidewater Room, and we also have many people virtual online. Welcome this morning to our first hybrid WLRT. Exciting times. We're so happy to partially be back in person. We're so happy to have the opportunity to have people join us virtually. This is going to be tricky trying to manage two rooms. And so I think I will have to depend on Joan to handle our virtual room, and I've got things nailed down here in person. For those of you who have never been to one of our WLRTs, I don't have the history in front of me, but these were started many, many years ago. I believe that Delegate Watts had a hand in them. And the reason is that it's so important to be able to keep up on legislature. Things move very quickly. Today is the first day of the 2022 General Assembly of Session. So, so happy to have you all with us this morning. And Joan, who do we have?
We are very happy to have Mr. Shawn Weneta from the Humanization Project, who is here first, and he is ready to go.
Thank you. And just to briefly introduce Shawn, this morning, our topic is the restoration of voting to returning citizens. And this has been a 2-year process for us. A constitutional amendment in Virginia has to pass once. There's an election in between. It passes a second time. And Shawn actually had his rights restored in the process of as this bill was progressing. And so he certainly can give us a firsthand experience of what that's like. But Shawn, thank you so much for your advocacy, and take it away.
Good morning. Thank you, Deb, and thank you, John. It's so nice to be here. I told some friends that I was going to be speaking at the Virginia League of Women Voters, and they said, what do they want to talk to you for? So I'm glad that I have something good to share with you. And to be here with some wonderful. I know there's some members of the General Assembly coming up that I'm really my favorite senators. So I'm pleased to be here for that as well. I'm going to go a little bit off the cuff today. I was born and raised in Washington D.C. and spent I guess sort of second half of my life in Northern Virginia. And I had an HR career and made the very foolish decision and very selfish decision to start stealing from my job. And I was caught, arrested, charged, and was given a 30-year prison sentence for embezzlement. This was in 2004. It was a bad time to be a white-collar criminal, certainly. Not that any time is good, but it was right on the heels of Enron and WorldCom and some of those accounting scandals, and the court clearly sent a message to me. And I knew that there was no parole in Virginia. I knew that there was no parole. I knew that there was truth in sentencing. So I knew that I had to work really hard in hopes of earning a pardon, and that's eventually what I did. A year and a half ago, I was pardoned by Governor Northam, and I've been home for a little over 18 months now. I got into advocacy with the Humanization Project. It's a small grassroots organization that works to humanize people behind bars. And that was what I wanted somebody to do for me. And now that I was home, I wanted to do that for others that I had spent so much time incarcerated with. I spent 16 years incarcerated. And I started working in the General Assembly with the Humanization Project. And what I would usually say when I showed up to hearings was, I'm home, but I can't vote. And so me speaking at these hearings is the only way that I get to have my voice heard. And I did that for several months. And then in March of 2021 now, I got a call from Kelly Thomason from the Secretary of the Commonwealth. And that is who the process goes through. If you've been convicted of a felony in Virginia, your rights are suspended for life without executive intervention. And Kelly Thomason, well, let me back up for 1 second there. During this last session, during that period, we had passed this first reference constitutional amendments to reinstate voting rights for people upon return from incarceration. Senator Locke had carried a bill that went further that we supported. I see Sheba Williams is on this call, that made it so you had a fundamental right to vote that you never lost, regardless of your status. Of course, we supported that. The House had another version that didn't go as far as where they landed, which right now the first reference constitutional amendment that passed last year and has been introduced again by Senator Locke this year, as well as Delegate Cherry from Chesterfield for the second reference, allows you to vote upon return from incarceration. In March, shortly after session ended, as I mentioned, Secretary Kelly Thomason called and asked me to appear at an event with Governor Northam, and it was dealing with voting rights. And on that day, he decided that he was going to get ahead of the constitutional amendment since he had executive authority and start restoring rights. And he restored rights to 69,045 people that day. Signing five, there was 5 of us in the room, and he signed 5 of our orders, and mine is hanging on the wall right there with the pen underneath it. I was the first one that Governor Northam restored rights to, who was currently under supervision in Virginia. When we were going through hearings, or when Kelly Thomason showed up and talked to me privately afterwards, she said that I wanted to be sure that you were here because I was at the hearings that you were speaking in the General Assembly, and you always talked about, I just want to vote, I just want to vote, I just want to vote. And I didn't have any concept of what that vote meant and what the value of it was until I went to prison. And in particular, I remember watching a few years back, I think it was 4 years ago now, maybe 6 years, when there was that district that they wound up having to draw the name out of a bowl. I think it was the clerk of the House of Delegates, I believe, had to draw a film canister with a name in it. And the one vote does matter. It is the way to have my voice heard. And I was so proud. As soon as the governor signed my order, I drove to the courthouse and registered. I could have done it online very easily with a couple of keystrokes and a click of a mouse, but I drove to the courthouse and did it in person. And I was thrilled when it was primary time shortly thereafter, and I ran to the courthouse again and voted for Senator McClellan, who's going to be here today in the primary, and a couple other candidates that I was very proud to vote for. And I voted again in November, and we could have an election for dog catcher. And if there's a vote here sign out front, I'm gonna do it, because I need to be sure that I have an opportunity to have my voice heard. Even if I don't show up for hearings and testify and work on legislation, that's my opportunity to have my voice heard. And I know that League of Women Voters, and I've had a lot of opportunity to see Deb Wake and Joan, and I believe and Denise. I don't know if she's on the call. Denise Harrington was at an event recently. Denise and I were at an event together recently, and we've been so thrilled that this has been a priority of the League of Women Voters. It's going to be a bit of an uphill battle, I think, this year in the House, and we're really going to need your help with the Privileges and Elections members to get this second reference to the floor in the House of Delegates. We're very excited about it. For me, what this is done, again, it's given me a voice outside of my advocacy. I know they introduced me as the Humanization Project. I last week started a job as a policy analyst or policy strategist with the ACLU. So I'm now able to get paid for the advocacy that I'm doing, which is really nice, because I was doing it full time anyway. But I know I need to shut up because there's some people that are really lovely coming to speak behind me. So, but thank you for having me today. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask them, whether it's in the chat or Denise is on the call. Either in the chat, or please approach me on Capitol Hill or on Capitol Square, or please feel free to reach out to me. I think Joan can put my name and email in the chat. And please also go to the ACLU Virginia voting rights page. We have a lot of good information about the constitutional amendment and efforts that we're taking to be sure that moves forward. So I will make sure that gets to Joan, and you can get it out to membership.
We're getting several applauses. Yeah, just send me anything. If you want us to receive something, Shawn, just drop it in the mail to me, and I'll make sure it goes into the magic Google file. Thank you. I don't know if Deb is having problems. There she is. Oh, they do have one question. Can you comment on how steep a climb we have, given that there is a new chair? And I won't mention any names, but you can see it in chat.
Sure, it is it's going to be difficult, but ultimately I try and break my mind works in a very just sort of strategic manner, and I think short of simply not docketing it, there's one thing that I understand about Todd Gilbert is he is about the Virginia way and believes that things should have a hearing and have the opportunity to move forward or not. So I think it would be very difficult for the incoming chair of P&E in the House to not give it a hearing, to not docket it. Whether it makes it out or not is to be seen. It's going to be difficult, and we won't know the membership of that committee until later today or tomorrow. But I would the best thing I can say is as soon as they publish that, as soon as it's announced who the members of that committee is when our action needs to go towards those members, because we do believe that through all the work that we've done, we believe that we have the votes on the floor of the House. So we really need to work hard to get it out of that committee. That's going to be that's I think where the battle is going to be for this. And it's really, there was a wonderful op-ed today. Please, if you haven't already, go online to the Richmond Times or pick up your copy. If you have it delivered to your door, obviously read that. There's a wonderful op-ed by Delegate Cherry, who is a Republican delegate from the Chesterfield Colonial Heights area, who is carrying the bill, and we work very hard on it, and he believes in it, and sheriffs that we talk to believe in it. There's a lot of people that believe in this amendment, that it shouldn't be in the hands of a partisan actor in the executive. It shouldn't take executive action to have your rights restored. It should be an automatic process. So please check out that op-ed and direct your attention to members of the Privileges and Elections Committee, House particularly.
Shawn, thank you so much for your advocacy and for putting your experience to work for this important issue. Thank you so much. Joan tells me that Senator Locke is in the room. Senator Locke has proposed this legislation year after year, and really appreciate her advocacy for voting rights. And Senator Locke, thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me this morning. I was having technical difficulties getting in here at 8:30, but I appreciate you all having me. And I think Shawn did a really, really good job of telling you about what this constitutional amendment is about. And we are at our second reference with regard to talking about the qualification of voters and the right of individuals to vote in this Commonwealth. If we call ourselves a democracy, this is what the democratic process is all about. It's giving individuals who are 18 years of age or older the absolute right to vote in this Commonwealth. And when we talk about individuals who have felonies on their record, and I think Shawn did mention that the initial bill that we had in the Senate was a much stronger version with regard to the right to vote. And the House had a weaker version. And of course, when you go through the compromise process, you have to do give and take here and there. Actually in the Senate, there were individuals who were more concerned about re-election than they were about actually moving through giving more individuals the right to vote process and not truly understand. No, I take that back. They did understand the origins of stripping individuals of their voting rights, and that origin occurred in the 1902 Virginia Constitution, and that it did occur in the Jim Crow era, and what that was all about. They did understand it, but they were worried about what it would mean if they voted for the original version of what we had in the Senate. And so when we were about to, it was actually on the floor. And so there was some amendments made to the floor version that stripped out some language of the floor version. And even then, what we had in the Senate was stronger than what came out of the House. And so one of the arguments that we were making was the version that was in the House was only about felony disenfranchisement. And the argument that we were making was that simply restoring the rights of individuals to vote was not enough. That if you only did restoration of rights, you weren't really getting at the core of what the problem was and what that 1902 Constitution had done to voting rights in the Commonwealth of Virginia, or what that 1902 Constitution had done to individuals who had mental disabilities, and that it had grown out of the eugenics movement, and that we had to fix it once and for all. And that what we had to understand was that if we only fixed felony disenfranchisement, what happens is what we're facing right now, is this uphill lift when this bill passes from the Senate over to the House. We have a battle on our hands. Because already we have pieces of legislation that have been introduced that's trying to roll back, voting rights legislation that we've already passed. Rolling back the number of weeks that we can have early voting, rolling back drop boxes, rolling back many other things that we have already done. If we had this constitutional amendment in place that says that voting rights is indeed, a fundamental right that cannot be abridged by law, we wouldn't have to worry about that anymore. But again, it's an uphill battle for us, and I'm assured that we can get this out of the Senate. But once it gets to the House, that's our uphill battle that we will have to face.
Thank you, Senator Locke, so very much. Joan, do we have any questions for Senator Locke?
I don't see any in the chat. Does anyone have any questions for Senator Locke? A lot of thank yous.
Thank you so much, Senator.
One other thing, we have to keep in mind too that none of the language in this amendment can change. So we have to be mindful of that too, of watching people try to put on amendments or even change a comma, a period, or even put in any kind of language change to the amendment. It has to pass in the exact same language.
Thank you. And we look forward to getting this passed this year. Thank you.
Thank you also very much. And I look forward to working with you on this.
Thank you. Us as well. In the room with us this morning, we have Delegate Vivian Watts. Delegate Watts has been a champion for the WLRTs and for the league for a number of years. She has just a few minutes and we appreciate you working us in this morning. Thank you.
Thank you all. It absolutely wouldn't be General Assembly session unless I was here at the round table. I mean, that's just what it is. And as always, while time is extremely pressured, it is always good to hear other members as well, because communication is a particular challenge as we continue to be the state with the smallest, shortest session. And how do you really have dialogue? And certainly from always, which is why I love being a leaguer, I've been a detail person, I've been a nerd person, and these details make a difference, but the communication, the rationality, all of that is what the challenges are in our short session, as well as what I regard to be our responsibility as legislators. So let me just quickly go to a landmark piece of legislation that I hope will be passed this year. For over 20 years, I've been introducing legislation because we are one of the few states that does not have staffing standards for nursing homes. And I have always been cut off by the fact of the cost. The first couple of years, they said, oh, nursing homes do this, no problem. We really don't need standards. Well, when they finally gave a fiscal impact statement, it's always been at least for very minimal standards. Approximately $25 million a year annually in Medicaid, state share of the Medicaid payments it would take to cover the cost of bringing up standards to even the neighborhood of about 2.5 hours of direct care per day. I have 24. The real standard should be at about 4, and at about 4, it's $40 million. We are that far behind. As you all know, about 60% of our populations in our nursing homes are on Medicaid. And in Virginia, you don't get in a nursing home on Medicaid unless you can not perform at least 2 of the 5 functions of daily living, which means you probably cannot get up and go to the bathroom. You cannot feed yourself. Now, this has been described as being proper policy because we want to keep people in their homes as long as we possibly can, a noble goal. But the trade-off means that our nursing home populations, again, emphasizing 60% of the 3,000 that are in nursing homes are there on Medicaid. So not to have nursing standards incommensurate with that is particularly, and I'm going to use the word inhumane. And it was really brought on home during COVID that Virginia has a higher percentage, 30% higher percentage of our COVID deaths happened in nursing homes compared to states elsewhere in the nation. 30%, it really brought it on home. And it brings it on home. Yes, I know there is, as there is in mental health, where I've spent so very much time, as well as in education and law enforcement. When you starve the beast, we have non-competitive salaries and we have undesirable working conditions for those who care most very often. So that our staffing standards within nursing homes, not having basic opportunity to care for the individual, as opposed to just move on to the next bed or not get to a bed until 10 in the morning or whatever it may be, also led to people having 2 jobs because they didn't have a decent salary. And so all of these conditions both lead to turnover, as well as most definitely the spread of COVID or any other communicable disease. So this, hopefully this year, with the kind of pressure that I'm just articulating, and particularly because of COVID, we will finally do it. I am being told that it will be funded in the current general fund, whereas I have always, for about the last 10 plus years, had a companion bill that said the way to pay for 60% of those in nursing homes. I'm quickly doing the math and saying it more accurately, but we'll say for the 20,000 in nursing homes, we could fund this need by taxing approximately 20 estates a year, where either the family has over $25 million in taxable estates, or an individual more than 12 million, excluding all family held farms and businesses, making sure that this continues from generation to generation as viable enterprise. But meanwhile, taxing individuals who otherwise have never paid taxes on that accumulated wealth. And it passes to the next generation at the current value. As I've so often said, if Dave and I are lucky, we'll still have a few 401ks that we haven't cashed in before we die, but we pay taxes every time on that capital gain. About 70% of the estate at this level, again, $25 million taxable estate, will pass to the next generation with no taxes. It's not double taxation. So I'm still saying that because that then brings me to just mention briefly my deep concern about, once again, we're in a situation with taxation being such a third rail of politics that people don't spend time seriously considering it. Ever since I have been in the General Assembly from my first 4 years, the break and then back on, I've been on the Finance Committee. And in those early years, it was a robust committee that really looked at solid tax policy. In recent years, it's been thumbs up, thumbs down. It's the latest good idea. No car tax, no food tax, not looking at ramifications of our tax system, both in Virginia's tax system, where counties until 2 years ago had basically colonial taxing powers, real estate, that's it. Whereas cities, which now cities are only 30% of our population, cities had the ability to look at the need for services, the fact that they're held accountable at the ballot box, and decide on issues like food tax, hotel tax, tobacco tax. Meanwhile, on the 70% of the population that are counties, if you need revenue, you've only really got the real estate tax. And the real estate tax has to be enacted in a single rate. So while you're taxing the bigger homes under that rate and there's more income, you can't have any of the gradients. You can't have that we need to have. In addition to that, and I love charts. There's a wonderful chart. I'll maybe bring it another week because it ties into so many issues. 75-year history of spending by households each decade in all of the categories of spending. Let's look just at the top 5 categories: housing and food and medical and transportation. The number 1 category is housing. The number 1 growth by a significant amount is housing over that 75 years, not medical, not food, not transportation. And yet here we are constantly pushing our tax burden onto the cost of housing, real estate tax, and not really looking at the many issues that we should address for true progressivity decisions, as well as, and I know my time is limited, if we do away with the tax on food, we have to have ongoing dedicated funding to make up for the significant loss to K through 12 funding, which is why it has not been removed before now, because of that way in which we fund K through 12. So because my time is limited, I will wrap up, because on taxes, I could keep on going, but hopefully the rational discussion is something that we are long overdue. And while I'm not as optimistic as I'd like to be for this session, let's see what we can do to really look at the system. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Watts, for your holistic view of taxes. And definitely, we do need some help with our COVID policies and our nursing home policies. Joan tells me that Senator McClellan is in the room. Senator McClellan, thank you. We appreciate so many of the bills that you have been proposing, that we have championed, voting bills, women's rights bills. Welcome.
Well, thank you. And it's good to be with the league this morning. It's an exciting day. It's the first day of session. I often feel like I did when it was the first day of school. It's going to be a little bit different this year, but even with the differences with the House majority changing and a new governor coming in, I'm still excited to be here. And sometimes I'm in awe. It's nice to be back in the Capitol after last session in the Science Museum. Every time I walk into this building and into the Senate chamber, I get goosebumps. And so I'm coming to you from the conference room in the Senate chamber, and very excited to be with you. Wanted to talk a little bit about restoration of rights. We have been fighting for automatic restoration of rights for those who have been convicted of felonies or adjudicated to be mentally incapacitated for longer than I have been here. And I have to acknowledge and pay tribute to the work of Senator Yvonne Miller. As you know, she was the first African-American woman elected to both the House and the Senate. And for as long as I can remember, she sponsored legislation to change our Constitution to allow automatic restoration or at a minimum, a legislative process. So to remind everybody where we are now is Virginia is one of, I think, only 2 states that not only do you lose your rights when your right to vote when you are convicted of a felony, but the only way you can have your rights restored is through the governor. For many years, it was a tedious, cumbersome process. And I'm happy to say that with bipartisan support over time, governors have made that process easier. And each governor has successively restored the rights of more and more returning citizens. But it should be automatic. It should be automatic. And so Senator Mamie Locke last year and has already put in this year, and I believe it was Delegate Shawn Herring had the House bill to put a constitutional amendment in to have the automatic restoration of rights once time is served and a citizen is returning back from incarceration. So we passed the first the first part last year, and as you recall, the process here in Virginia is a constitutional amendment has to pass 2 General Assembly sessions with an intervening state election. And so I am confident, but I know we will need your help and your advocacy to pass the second resolution so that that constitutional amendment can go to the voters this November. And I know, and I look forward to seeing you all, whether it is virtually or in person. I will just remind everyone that the Senate got pretty used to last year taking testimony virtually. We also had, I mean, even some Senate members had to participate virtually. And so that will still be an option. People will still be able to provide public comment as well. Both the House and the Senate are allowing a virtual option for public testimony in hearings. And each individual senator will handle sort of the protocol for their offices. Probably most of my meetings will be virtual. To be honest, it's kind of easier rather than having to run back and forth between the Capitol and the Pocahontas building. But hopefully we will see you safely with masks and hopefully you're vaccinated. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions that you all have either on restoration of rights or anything else.
We're getting lots of thank yous. Don't have any questions per se. Thank you for protecting. Is there a bill number to reference? Question.
Yeah. Yes, there is. So on the Senator Locke's bill, it's SJ1, which you may recall was also the bill number for the resolution to ratify the ERA. I have not checked to see if the House version has been filed yet, but SJ1 is the Senate version.
Yeah, and in the link that you all have, Janet Boyd did a very good background on the legislation. So it is in the Google Drive that y'all have. I'm seeing HJ9. Shawn just dropped in, it's HA9.
Here we go.
Here's a question. Speaking of the ERA, any thoughts?
You know, it's been a long journey, but it's not quite over yet. So we are still waiting for the archivist to put the ERA in the Constitution. It has been ratified by the requisite number of states, with Virginia putting it over the top. However, under the Trump administration, there was a memo from the Attorney General's office that basically said the ratification window had closed because of the deadline and not past the deadline. So the ERA is right now in litigation. Virginia, Illinois, and Nevada filed a lawsuit. Not sure if Virginia will remain officially a part of that lawsuit. We will see with the new Attorney General. But Virginia legislators, current and former, are definitely involved with that lawsuit. So we'll see what happens. But I was proud to testify in Congress in the fall with a number of other advocates on why it was time for either the archivist to go ahead and put it in the Constitution, and to the extent there's congressional action to make it so that Congress act.
Great. We have another question about committee assignments. Do you have any idea when they'll be out?
So traditionally, the speaker announces them the first day of session. There are always exceptions. I believe they will be out, if not by the end of this week, then probably Monday at the latest. Committee, this is on the House side. Senate committees don't change because we're still in the middle of our term, but the speaker did announce committee chairs already. So I think it should not be very long for committee assignments to come out.
We have two questions about concerns over rollbacks as of voting access bills, like getting rid of drop boxes, requiring photo ID again. Do you have any feel on those?
I do. So that we know their efforts. Senator Amanda Chase has already announced she's coming after that progress. We've seen a couple of House bills already filed. When I saw those bills, I channeled my inner Gandalf, and I don't know if you remember in Lord of the Rings when he's on the bridge and he says, "Thou shalt not pass." So that is the energy that I'm bringing into session. I am confident we will hold the line on the Senate side and keep any effort to roll back voting rights at bay. But make your voice heard on that. Let's make sure that the House and Senate Republicans hear from you that you like those changes, you want those changes to remain.
Okay, and I know Deb has a question, but we just got one in about the Andrew Wheeler nomination. What the likelihood of confirmation, and what's the status of campaign finance? Is there any hope?
So with Mr. Wheeler, I would be very surprised if he got a single Democratic vote. I will not be supporting him. And every one of my colleagues that I have spoken to has said the same. As for campaign finance reform, maybe, that also has had bipartisan support in both the House and the Senate, just not majority support. So I know there will be bills filed again, many of which you've seen in the past. And so I think making your voice heard on that, particularly with the new House members, is critically important.
Great, thank you. Deb, we're done with chat.
Thank you. Senator, we have a question here in the room. Could you please explain the difference between SJ1 and SB 21, the constitutional amendment voter referendum?
Oh, very great question. So they're connected. The process for passing a constitutional amendment is you have the actual resolution that is the amendment, and then you have two other things. Once it passes, you need to officially put it on the ballot. And so that referendum is what will officially put it on the ballot. And then you'll probably see at some point, if not already, a bill that outlines what that language will be on the ballot. So it's a 3-piece process, but it all is the same thing.
Thank you so much. So Senator, thank you for your advocacy. And just to let you know, the league did file an amici brief this week to join the fight to get the ERA ratified. So thank you for your work in that as well.
Thank you, and keep up the fight. You all are a big part of why I am here. And you are a big part of all of the success that we have had, the generational success we had on a number of issues in the past 2 years. So you will be critical to keeping it. Y'all have a great day.
Thank you, you too. Good luck today.
Thank you.
Our final speaker today is a great friend of the league's. Daquan Love is the executive director of NAACP Virginia and also a partner on this critical issue. So welcome, Daquan.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Daquan Marcel Love, Executive Director of the Virginia State Conference, NAACP, the governing body that oversees over 110 branches, youth councils, college chapters of the NAACP here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I'm always excited to be with the League of Women Voters, and especially with my good friend Deb, your president. You know, when we talk about the work that we have to do, and we look at across the length and breadth of this Commonwealth, there's so many groups, there's so many organizations, there's a coalition for this, there's a group for that. But I have truly found great partnership and friendship with your president, Deb, and with the League of Women Voters. And please know that the NAACP and our branches truly appreciate that valued partnership. You know, the NAACP and the League are two of the oldest advocacy organizations here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And when you are over 100 years old, you have a little bit of privilege that you get to take, meaning that we have a shared history, both the League and the NAACP, of being century-year-old organizations that have been in this fight. We're not fly-by-night operations. We didn't show up yesterday with a sign. We have been here in communities across Virginia doing the work to expand voting rights and civil rights for all Virginians. The Virginia NAACP, along with the League and other organizations, are really excited to partner together to establish a right to vote coalition. And we're so excited that the League and the NAACP and other groups are working together on this important effort. As you know, last year in session, SJ 272, which would establish a constitutional right to vote, was passed. And you know, constitutional amendments have to be passed twice. Now, we know that this is a tremendous and uphill battle this year in getting right to vote legislation, not just through committee and to the floor and on the other side of the aisle, and then to the governor's desk for signature. But as century-year-old organizations, as 100-plus-year-old organizations, I know that the NAACP and the League of Women Voters are here for the fight. We have to fight to ensure that we expand a right to vote and guarantee a constitutional right to vote in our state constitution in 2021. This is not going to be an easy battle. We have a lot of challenges just in the next 60 days to overcome. But I know and I'm confident that the League and the mighty women of the League, combined with the mighty men and women of the NAACP and our partner organizations, we can get it done. And so I've come here this morning for those of you here in person, for those of you on virtually and hybrid, to let you know that we cannot give up in this fight. We just as the League of Women Voters fought long and hard and are still fighting just for a basic constitutional right for the ERA to be added to our US Constitution. We're going to have to fight long and hard to add a constitutional right to vote to our state's constitution. If you're in the chat box, if you're in Zoom, I want you to put in the chat box, I'm ready to fight. If you're on Zoom, I want you to put in the chat box. I can't see the chat box, but I can see the numbers when they go up. I want to see folks say, I'm ready to fight. Are y'all ready to fight in here?
I'm ready to fight.
Well, I can't hear you. Are you ready to fight?
I'm ready to fight.
We're going to fight for the right to vote. And I'm excited. I also see briefly, I think I saw some NAAC peers in the chat box and on Zoom. So thank you for your leadership and what you're doing. Y'all, this is not going to be easy. But when has the League of Women Voters and the NAACP stopped doing something because it wasn't easy? So as we go through session, and I know we have plenty of legislative priorities, we have a legislative agenda, but this is the one piece of legislation, the one constitutional amendment that lifts up all the others. Because if we can expand voting, if we can protect voting, if we can enshrine the right to vote, then everything else that matters to us in the communities that we represent will be that much easier to get accomplished. So I don't know if there are questions. I'd love to take them. As you know, the NAACP has a very robust agenda, and you can visit our website, NAACP-VA.org. I see folks are ready. Get ready, get ready. I love it. I love it. But I want to answer questions. I want to also say tomorrow we are going to be unveiling our 2022 legislative agenda. Now, you know, the NAACP has a long agenda from housing to criminal and juvenile justice, economic development, the environmental, climate justice, education, healthcare. Did I say voting rights? So I won't belabor you with those pieces of our agenda, but I would encourage you to visit our website, NAACP-VA.org, and you can sign up for our action alerts as well. And we would love to stay connected with you as we go through this important fight together. So if you're ready to fight, let's get ready to fight and let's get ready to win. I think I saw some questions.
Thank you so much. I was wondering if you were having an in-person lobby day this year.
That's a great question. You know, due to COVID-19, what we have decided to do is we're going to do another virtual lobby day. And that lobby day is on Tuesday, January the 19th. And that is, and I can also put in the chat the link to that if folks want to register for that, which is NAACP-VA.us/LAD for Legislative Advocacy Day. And on that Legislative Advocacy Day, we'll begin with a brief plenary in the morning. I think it's from 9 to 11 or 10 to 12, something like that. I don't have the details in front of me. Where we will hear from legislators, much as you are doing in this roundtable. We'll also do a brief advocacy training. And then what we have done is we've set up virtual meetings where individuals who register will help set you up with a meeting with your legislator. So folks who are in the same district around with you in the NAACP can meet together with those legislators to talk about the NAACP's legislative agenda.
There is a question in the chat.
Okay.
Do you have a question there?
Joan, you said there's a question in the chat?
There's one. Is a long or short legislative agenda more effective?
You know, that's a great question. And that's a question that I battle with my political action committee all the time with. Here's what I know. And I think this is a good question to ask as it relates to the NAACP and the League of Women Voters. You know, the NAACP has our mission to ensure the political, educational, social, and economic equality of rights for all, and to eliminate race-based hatred and racial discrimination. That's a large mission. That's a lofty goal. And we know in order to accomplish that, there's so many pieces of the puzzle that encompass in that mission. And so some will look at our agenda and say, it's too big, it's too robust. You can't, you know, you won't be able to focus your energies on the things that matter. And so when folks tell me that, and when they, you know, because that's a very valid question, I often respond to them and say, if not us, who? And if not now, when? And so you can have multiple priorities, and you'll hear something we say in the NAACP, and sometimes people don't even tell the difference. We have a legislative agenda. And our legislative agenda is the over-encompassing large piece of what do we want to see in education? What do we want to see in healthcare? What do we want to see in housing? X, Y, Z. Our legislative priorities, those are the items of particular focus that we are advocating for. The NAACP has a powerful voice, just as the League. And we know that on some pieces of legislation, we don't need to champion it. We don't have to be the champion from committee to the House to the floor, but we also, there's some pieces of legislation, like I'll give you main point, the marijuana legislation last year. If you recall, the NAACP, while being very supportive of marijuana legalization, or as we call decriminalization, we didn't lead that fight, and we acknowledge that. And that's all right. There were other groups and advocacy groups that got that bill out of committee, got it to the floor. But I have you know that it was on the floor of the state Senate where state senators brought up, and we're flashing, it said, this is a press release from the Virginia State Conference, NAACP, because we knew that our voice could be most effective and impactful at that particular moment. And so I would encourage the League to use your voice and to continue to be strategic as century-year-old organizations. There's nothing wrong with being old when it comes to being an organization. So that's all right. And we use that to our advantage. So to answer your question, yes, we have a long agenda, but you know what? There's so many Black and brown folks in the Commonwealth of Virginia who don't have a voice, who can't take off, who can't be at the legislature, and we're their voice. So, we make no apologies for being as robust as we do with our agenda. And are we stretched thin? Like most advocacy organizations, we are. And y'all are a completely volunteer-run organization. Deb reminds me that all the time. And for us, we're volunteer-led. We have 2 staff for the entire state of Virginia. And so very similar. And to that end, we do what we have to do when we get it done. I hope that answers the question.
Sure. What was that website again?
Do you mind if I type it in? Or is it over there? Okay, perfect. Oh, sure. Oh, happy to be here.
Try to engage young people. We're trying to figure out ways that we can bring a younger demographic into our neighborhoods in the state too. And I just wondered what you thought about that and what's the NAACP doing?
I'm a product of our Youth and College Division. I am a lifelong NAACP peer, and people kind of get confused when I tell them I came out of NAACP retirement to take this job, because I served on our national board for 4 years prior to, saying, I've been on the national board. I was national convention vice chair. I've done a lifetime of service for this organization. But all jokes aside, I say to that, what the NAACP has done is we have a very robust Youth and College Division. It was on March the 9th, 1935, Weneta Jackson Mitchell stood up on the floor of the St. Louis NAACP convention and declared that we needed a Youth and College Division to handle its needs. And we saw this need happening literally almost 90 some odd years ago. And so the NAACP's Youth and College Division includes youth councils. I know we have a very robust youth council in York, James City, Williamsburg. As you mentioned, you're from Williamsburg. We have college chapters that are in most of our colleges, especially the larger ones, all of our HBCUs, etc. But having chapters and branches doesn't equal engagement always, right? And so what we have found is talking to our Youth and College Division members and including them. And I have to also note that the NAACP is one of the very few organizations on a national level that reserves literally 10% of its board seats for young people under the age of 25. And I was a product of that. And when we have a board seats on our state level for our youth and college leaders, we're not separate, we in a sense, but we work very closely together and we really engage that leadership component. But what we have found is engaging young people in issues that they care about. And so one of the things that has really increased youth and college membership in the last 6 months across the country for the NAACP is the NAACP's campaign on student debt relief and student loan relief. Young folks understand, there are a lot of folks that understand that they may be too involved, they may be too uninformed to really get involved themselves in the advocacy, but they want to support the groups and organizations that are doing the advocacy. And they have a lot of respect for legacy groups that are doing that work and have that history, that shared history. So, you know, what I say is talk about the issues. You know, meet folks where they are. I know the league has a very robust social media presence. Continuing that is always good. But, you know, as I try to tell, I tell folks in the NAACP, people don't want to buy an NAACP membership anymore just because it's the NAACP, and that's because, you know, my mother was an NAACP or my grandmother was an NAACP or XYZ. People want to join organizations. They want to be involved because they care about issues, and sometimes that can be a challenge for us in legacy organizations. So I would encourage folks, you know, when you're talking about the league, talk about how you still to this day are fighting to ensure that women have an equal right, and that those rights are enshrined in the U.S. Constitution, fighting for voting rights, and how you are working to enshrine a right to vote in the Virginia Constitution. Those are issues that everyone cares about, whether you are 75 or 27. And so I would encourage, you know, focus on those issues and engage people on those issues, and it tends to be fairly engaging for folks. Yeah. Any other questions?
None here.
Okay. Well, I just want to say thank you so much to you all joining virtually. Thank you to those here. And I always have to shout out Deb. She's a great, when I tell you she's a great friend and a great partner, and we've worked on a couple of different projects the last, this month makes a year that I've been in this role. And, you know, you work with a lot of people and when you lead a statewide organization, but I tell you, Deb is truly a phenomenal person to work with. She's very honest, transparent. She's friendly. She's personable, and we're able to work together. And I also have to shout out. I don't know if Denise Harrington is on.
Yes, she is.
But
she's here
if she's
virtually.
Here, but I wanted to shout her out. And was it Janet Boyd? Janet Boyd.
Yes. Janet's here.
I didn't know if Janet was on, but Denise keeps me in check, y'all. I tell you, she makes sure the NAACP and the league work together, as well as Janet in working with our right to vote. So thank y'all so much. And Joan, as always, you put on these fantastic programs and get things done and keep things moving. So yes. I'll get out y'all way, and I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Thank you, Daquan. That bribe money worked.
So Daquan, as always, really appreciate your partnership and your friendship, and we do great work together and we get stuff done. So thank you so much. Daquan is putting the link into the chat, so don't go before you get that. Just to wrap up, thank you again for participating today. This was a learning experience, trying to do it in 2 rooms, and we'll see how that goes again next week. Just a reminder, next week our focus will be witness requirement on absentee ballots, and a reminder that the league did bring 3 lawsuits at least to waive that when we were in a pandemic. And we found that elections ran just fine without that witness requirement for absentee ballots. So we are trying to get that removed as a requirement, and that will be the focus of next week. So thank you again for joining us. Joan, is there anything else I've missed?
I don't think so. I just reminded everybody that Janet's history on the restoration legislation is in the Google Drive, and that will be updated every week with agendas and any material we get from our speakers.
Awesome. So thank you again. Drive safely. We will be sending out action alerts on Outreach Circle. So if you've not signed up for Outreach Circle, do so, because that's how we're going to get those out to you, and contact your legislators. Thanks. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Great, Joan. Very good. I mean, really good.
Thanks, Denise.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys. See you next week.
Yeah.